live from Sister Basebone Studio. Urban Teachers Lounge is a platform for bridging the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. Voices will include teachers, administrators, educational scholars, community members, and activists.
Hey everybody, welcome to Urban Teachers Lounge. I'm your host, Funmilayo Devoe. This podcast is unapologetically for Black teachers, unapologetically by Black teachers. The purpose of the program is to bridge the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. This week, I have a special guest. I love when I have teacher guests on. And so, just go on and get your cup of coffee because this is going to be a good talk. All right. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Good morning. Good morning. I'm excited to introduce to you a friend of mine who is a long-time educator, almost 20 years. She's taught in Texas, in Georgia, in South Kakalaki. She's done private, public, and Catholic schools. She's a mother of two, masters in curriculum and instruction technology. Please put your hands together. Yes, I like to say that. Put your hands together for my friend, Elle Rochelle. Elle Rochelle, speak this morning. How you doing, honey?
Good morning. I'm doing very well.
Good morning. So I am excited, one, to talk to you. I haven't talked to you in years. And so for us to reconnect, and you will definitely be, you are invited officially today to come back whenever you want to. So today, as we were preparing for this, we said that we were going to talk about a big conversation is around alternative certification of teachers. And then the other thing we said just about the profession itself not being for everybody. And the last thing, reciprocity with your certification. So I'm putting that out there so we can make sure that we touch on those points because I know that this will flow. So welcome to the show. Let's go. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. And thank you so much for having me this morning.
Yes. Excited. So I'm going to let you kind of take the lead on this. Let's start with the alternative certification programs. So I shared with you this when I first met you. I met you in 2005, but when I started teaching, it was in 2001, and I was in Dallas. And at the time, the state of Texas was having a teacher crisis, right? And so they had this major push to get teachers in. And so I was a part of the emergency teacher certification program, but it was through the school district. It was a year-long program, basically OJT. We were in a classroom. We had mentors. We had tutors. We had classes at the end of the day. We had class all for the entire summer that year. And I think that my experience in alternative certification, although it was almost 20 years ago, is clearly a lot different from the evolution of this. So tell me, one, your perspective of this and your experience there in alternative ed.
Well, I will start off with my initial experience because I went through an alternative certification program also. And initially, I actually went through two programs. The first program I started was through a local university in Texas, as I had left retail management. I had completed a management program for one of the biggest grocery chains in America, was successful at that, but felt like I had a calling to teach.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, my management mentor said that he thought that would be great for me, even though I was successful in a store that was making $1 million a week.
Wow.
So I went back home. I'd already, started grad school and joined this program at this university and started teaching in a really small community. And I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
My first year, I had 4 different preps. I taught.
Oh, wow. You didn't know any better, did you?
Yeah, I taught 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, all at this school, and I even volunteered as the assistant band director when the band director had to go out on maternity leave.
Yes, that's right. You're a musician. Yes.
Yes. But I was in the alternative certification program and trucking on along and getting a lot of knowledge. It was a great program at the university that I was going through. And I think I really benefited at that point because I was new to education. I had a lot of great mentors on my team and through the university. But 30 days into my contract, I got a pink slip. And the district was downsizing, and they said the last 30 teachers hired would have to be the first 30 teachers fired.
Yeah.
Because they were closing the campus that I was at.
Oh.
And so at that point, I decided that I would move to the big city, about 100 miles away. And when I applied and I interviewed, they offered me the chance to be the very last person that could enter their alternative certification program, which happened to be through the university that I'd done my undergraduate work at. So I remember I signed up to be a part of their alternative certification program over the Christmas break. HR was closed, and the HR director came in so that he could sign the paperwork, and that school district paid for my alternative certification, and I was the last person in that school district that they paid for.
Wow.
So, but what I can say about that program is that it was a very sound program. The program was through a university that is known to produce productive educators, and anybody that hears that will know exactly what HBCU I am talking about. But that program also had great leadership, great follow through and follow up. The ladies that were former educators that were working with that program would be seen on campuses all over going in to work with, not chastise or demean anyone, going in and helping teachers. And they paired me with a great mentor. And to this day, 20 years later, if I'm having difficulty at work or have something that I need to think through, even being in positions of leadership, I have called that mentor, and she still picks up the phone. And I'm sharing my experience to say that these new alternative certification programs, especially those that are primarily online, are doing a severe injustice to people that have chosen to teach as an alternative to another mainstream career, and they are not receiving the support, that one-on-one, that face-to-face. They still need that human interaction to glean skills from someone, as well as have someone to talk through situations with.
So,
and I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead and finish your thought, and I'll say what I was going to say.
And I was just going to say, as I have mentored at this point in my career, I've mentored hundreds of people. And the biggest problems that I've had with mentees have come from people who are using an online alternative certification program.
So, okay. So I want to go back just to one thing. First, the mentor piece. One of my goals, of course, this podcast, and my goal professionally is to definitely move into a position of teacher mentorship. I think that is a powerful piece. Just like when I was in nonprofit, I wrote grants for a mentoring program for the teenagers. And in doing that research, along with, Obama's mentoring program, My Brother's Keeper, and such as that, I know for a fact that mentorship is good for everybody. It's good for, no matter where you are on your career, in school, it's necessary. And it's interesting. One of the things that I'm finding is with elder teachers leaving, a lot of times there needs to be a bridge between the generations as it relates to, yes, I know that all the old head teachers, like all of them are not doing whatever you think they should be doing, but they do bring about something that is very necessary for younger teachers to know. And I say that because this summer, I came back to work, obviously, and I went to a PD, right? And so we had, I hate district PD. Because most of the time I'm always like, I could have done that. But the last two that I've been to, I was actually impressed because they had some good folks in there. I was like, okay, bet I can sit up in this class. But the one we looked at, I remember walking down the hallway and I looked in the room and it was an elder woman. And as a matter of fact, her name was Miss Ellen. And it was like, she said she had her name wrote out. You could tell she was English. I think she taught elementary or middle school, right? So she had her name on it and it said Ellen something, whatever. And everybody knew walking in, not only because we're all in the South, in Georgia, but everybody knew when you saw her, she's Miss Ellen. It was understood. Yeah. And if I tell you, it's something that you said that made me think about her, when it was the way that she taught. I don't even remember what she was teaching us, but it was the way that she handled us. And she was like, I know that you all know this. I'm just trying to remind you of, I just want to help you remember to do what you know is best. And so I think in saying that, the problem that I've seen is a lot of times people that are so-called coaching or mentoring teachers, it's very punitive. It's very, you're going to check a box and tell me, I didn't do this, and this, but you haven't built a relationship. So I'm really intrigued that you say that you've been able to mentor over 100 people, because the question is for you, how powerful, from their perspective, how powerful is that? You shared your story of how powerful it was for you. And have they stayed? Did they notice, what were some of the storylines on their process of getting to you, right? Because I can imagine that somebody can say the wrong thing and people would just quit the profession, and we might lose somebody that we could have groomed very well to be a fabulous teacher. So I don't know, what does that look like from, and I'm going to add to that, in looking at these teacher certification, these alternative ones, I think that is a missing link, because it sounds like your experience and my experience in an alternative program, I had senior leaders, senior teachers that were retired, that were in the cut. We had professors that this was their work and they were diligent about making sure that we were approaching this from a humanistic perspective and not a business perspective, right?
And I will say that the program that I was a part of when I made it to the city school, they were very humanistic, as you said. And one thing, in all of the classes that I took for the certification, they reminded or they instilled in me the importance of holistic teaching.
Yes.
Not
the whole child.
Teaching the whole child.
The whole child.
Yes. And knowing how to, they gave me the tools that I needed to deal with some situations that, I came from a smaller country town, both my parents worked for oil companies. And, we had a good life. While we had some racial tensions and struggles in the town that I grew up in Southeast Texas, but still, I had a good upbringing.
Right.
But I was not blind. My parents never made me blind to what was going on with the rest of the world.
Right.
And having that perspective and coming in and just teaching with my heart
Right.
really helped me to become a success after going through alternative certification. But I think that is something that's
Lacking.
that's missing.
It's missing.
That's that link. I mean,
So it is lacking. The fact that we've gone from somewhere along the line, we've gone to a more management system of teaching. And it's as if we don't have humans. We're humans, and this is a human job. And so to approach it from a capitalistic supply and demand, that is not what our kids need. And to train teachers as such, which is, like I said, we're going to talk about this elephant in the room. When you have these alternative programs that are training teachers from a mindset of supply and demand, yes, we need teachers, but you're not looking at the fact that there's an exodus of teachers, number one. And why do we need teachers? Why are teachers leaving? Right? So we got to get back to this human piece. We got to bring that back. And mentorship for our teachers and eldership for passing the baton to the new teachers is necessary. It's necessary.
well, the thing about eldership, let's talk about the elders. The elders have something that no one could ever take from them,
Yeah.
and it's content knowledge.
Yes, ma'am. Can you say that again? Wait, pause. You can't be no teacher if you don't know your content, because teachers who know content, I'm on my soapbox now. If you know your content, you can teach anybody because you love the content, you know the content, and I can teach, I can break it down. I can watch a movie, I can go outside and play with some damn leaves and figure out how to teach some kids theme. But if you don't know your content, honey, whoo. And that is what eldership brings to the game. I'm going to teach you how to teach your content, and then everything else falls in line. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to get that out. I had to get that out.
In my first teaching assignment, as I shared with you, I had multiple preps. I taught 7th grade reading, 8th grade English, 9th grade world history, 10th grade world geography.
Oh, God. Wow.
And every single night, I had to bring my TE home with me.
Had
now,
homework.
New teachers might not even know what TE stands for, but that was the teacher's edition.
The big thick book.
And my first year of teaching, I will tell you, I didn't have a life. The person that was over my department came to me, and she said, "Look, I have breast cancer.
Oh.
And I can't lead this department the way it needs to." She said, also, at that point, computers were, taking over.
Yep.
She said, "I don't know anything about computers, and you seem to know it all. So you're going to go to all of the leadership meetings. Yes. You're going to do all the heavy lifting, but I'm going to be in the background telling you what to do.
Yes.
So... But she said, you have to stay 2 chapters ahead of your kids every week.
Right.
She said, you will lose your kids if you don't stay ahead. Now, I will tell you, when I had come in as a long-term sub the year before, and the class that I had taken over, I was the 9th teacher. In that classroom that year, and it was only February.
Yep.
The teacher before me, they'd thrown his desk down the stairs, and he left that school and went to an alternative school.
Oh, okay. So that wasn't the alternative school where they throwing desks down the stairs. No,
that was a regular school.
That's regular school. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But that elder that took me under her wing, my first full year in the classroom as a contracted teacher, even though I would, eventually get that pink slip, she took me under her wing and was like, hey, this is what you need to do. This is how you manage your time. This is how you, use your grade book, because people take grades very lightly, and they don't understand that has legal ramifications.
Yeah.
And your grade book is essentially whether it's on paper or electronically, it is a legal document.
It's a legal document.
But if I didn't have that elder showing me those things and had the willingness to listen and learn, that's another thing. That's right. That has broke down. I mean, it has broken down some relationships that I've had from mentor to mentee. And it's that unwillingness to listen.
Right.
But I'm glad that I had that early on, because when I left that school in that small town and moved to the big city and got another mentor, she told me when I walked in, and she came in for like a week observing. And ironically, the position that I was hired for a position for a class that had never been taught before. There was no curriculum. Technology Research Investigation Projects for Social Studies. That was the whole name of the class. They called it TRIP.
The whole name.
Now, and as a new teacher, I had to write the curriculum. But you know how I was able to write that curriculum? I knew my content.
You know your content. And
that is the basis.
That's the basis.
Everything as an educator moving forward. You ain't nothing if you don't know your content.
And I'll take that even a step forward. Even with not only knowing your content, but loving it. So there's a difference when, for me, and I talk about students that I've taught over the years, when you know that your kids are 3, 4, 5 years behind on a reading level, and you read Julius Caesar or any other Shakespearean piece, or right now I'm having my kids and I'm traumatizing them. They had to read Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise, right? And now we're reading the bigger piece, W.E.B. Du Bois's response to Booker T. Washington. And I've been stressing about it, like, oh my God, this is going to be such a difficult thing for them to read, but they got to read it. They've been complaining. And I had already set up the curriculum, but they had already been complaining, oh, they never teach us about blackness. Okay, baby, you in the right class right now. But I just flat told one of my classes the other day, I was like, look, you can't be mad about teachers not teaching you about being black and black history and so on and so forth if you're not willing to read. I said, because those scholars, those black people that you want to know about, they wrote. And they wrote big words. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not no Dick and Jane come and see. No, they wrote some stuff. But the point is, when you love the curriculum, or not even necessarily the curriculum, but you love the content. When you love the content, you will force that kid to, it'll just fall off on them. The excitement of, oh, we're gonna do this. I get to write a story just like, Animal Farm. I get to, this is what you want me to. Yes, I want you to choose an issue and do it. And it's the content, but it's also the love of that content. And so again, I think it goes back to not having that eldership or having somebody whispering in your ear like, baby, this is how you do this. This is how you do this. And this goes back to something you said off the air, classroom management. Part of your classroom management is you don't know the content, so you don't know how to break it down, make it fun, and the kids just drift. They drift.
But you know what messes people up with classroom management, especially people that are coming from outside of education? And it's the old school basics, and it goes back to the eldership that you speak of.
Yeah.
I remember my first teaching assignment. Our principal told us that we had 1 week to make sure that we had called every single parent of every student on our roster. Now, I will tell you, at that time, around 2000, there was no challenge. There was not one complaint. The only thing you was trying to do around that school was find a phone.
Right.
Okay? Because we didn't have phones in our classroom at that point.
And you sure didn't have no cell phone.
You had to go to the teacher's lounge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, cell phones, we were still paying by the minute.
Right.
And, you had to hustle to go find a phone because you could call from your house. Now,
Right.
real old school teachers would call from the house
from
and
the
not
house
care if
at 6
you
o'clock.
called them and hanging up in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
But, our principal said, hey, stay in the building.
Right.
We're going to make these calls. And that piece of, I guess that directive did a number of things. Told you who had a working phone number. 9 times out of 10, if the phone number didn't work, that was your bad jokers that you needed to focus on.
Exactly.
And go on ahead and make sure you had a line of communication so that you could go on ahead and nip that in the bud early.
Right.
And let administration know. And also for a safety issue.
Yeah.
What if that kid got sick and we couldn't get in touch with anyone? We needed to know if the numbers were working.
That happened to me.
Yeah.
It took 3 hours. A kid passed out in the middle of the hallway. It took us 3 hours to find his parents. We barely were able, I think we just made a command call to take the kid via the ambulance to the hospital. And it took the parent like three hours for us to find somebody. I'm like, this is unbelievable. Now, I understand you don't want the school to call, but guess what? If they calling about my children, I'm stopping whatever I'm doing. I got to go check on mine.
Yep.
And so that is a big piece. We don't include parents like we and so let's talk about parents for a half a second. So the issue with parents, what I don't like as a parent, here's a prime example. Why you got a PTA or a teacher parent conference at 3:45? First of all, I'm at work at 3:45. I'm physically at work at 3:45. I can't make it to my kids nothing at 3:45. So, but you make the assumption that parents don't want to check on their children or don't want to know. You've already painted this same dysfunctional picture that you got from the media or wherever, and you made the assumption that they don't care because they don't show up to your meeting at 3:45.
Well, I think that there's a paradigm shift going on with that, because I will tell you that I worked at a school in inner city Houston where the administration came up with Meet the Teacher Night that was called Tacos with Teachers.
Oh, yes.
I couldn't remember. I mean, I couldn't imagine. It was over 1,000 people.
Cute.
The first night that I worked with them.
Look,
on
that's
this.
Cute. I'm writing that down. That's a cute idea.
Yeah.
Tacos with teachers. Tacos.
But it took a lot of work on behalf of
the staff.
that administration to make it work. But through nights like that, every grading period, and it was a sacrifice for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That principal made the teachers stay until 7, 8 o'clock at night, so that they could have evening on-the-spot conferences with parents.
Exactly.
So, and I'm seeing it more often than not.
I like that.
Even here in South Carolina, last week we had a fall fest, and during the fall festival, all the kids were outside eating. Everything was free to eat. We had jumpy houses and everything, but all of the teaching teams were in the building having parent conferences.
I love it. And I think we do need to figure out new ways of engaging parents. And that's been a thing, because again, going back to your statement about teaching the whole child is also needs a whole community, right? So it's not just the teacher, it's the teacher, the janitor, the cafeteria lady, right? You gotta have the cafeteria lady in your corner, right? Then you gotta have the parents, the coach, the pastor, the neighborhood, community business, the barbershop man, the hairstylist. Like, it's all of us. And how do we make it accessible to our parents? Because you have to know that you cannot think that it makes sense to have a meeting at 3:45 and then be mad because 4 parents came, or it's from 3:45 to 5, right, or 5:30, and then all the parents run up in there because they just getting behind traffic. They getting there at 4:45, and then the teacher's still staying late. My thing is, I would rather you tell me, leave at 3:30, go get you something to eat, be back in this building by 5:45. We rolling from 6 to 8. You do better to tell me that, have it on my calendar, and I'm good, opposed to me being more frustrated because I done been there all day, and now I'm staying here, and then I'm still staying extra beyond the time because the parents couldn't get there. But you didn't make it convenient for the parents.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate with you on that one.
Play it.
As the parent.
Right.
As a parent,
we need to cook.
I don't. First of all, you gotta want it.
Right. I agree with that.
And when you want it,
you'll make it happen.
The school's gotta give it to you.
Yeah, that's true.
If you tell, and I saw a teacher sit at the school last week until 7:00 because a parent had they had scheduled an appointment. They scheduled the appointment for 5:00.
Oh wow!
And still. Parent didn't show up. Parent kept saying, "I'm right across the bridge. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. I'm on my way."
Girl, you could have walked.
But I'm playing devil's advocate because as a parent, if you tell the teacher, "Hey," or the teacher calls and says, "I need to have a conference with you at 3." Well, if ain't nobody bleeding, I can't be there at 3.
Thank you.
So. And if they don't want to accommodate you, that's when you start going up the chain of command. Exactly. And that's when leadership has to come in and be like, wait a minute.
I agree.
We're begging teachers to come into the school. Parents to come into the school. And here's a parent that wants to come in. And you're going to deny them because of that? Oh, no. We're going to sit here and we're going to wait on Miss Molly to get off of work.
Exactly.
And beat it through the traffic. It's gonna take her 45 minutes to get here. Exactly. Bring you a snack on that day because we're gonna wait because this conference needs to happen. And you know what parents know that they can have conferences at their convenience? Special ed parents.
Exactly. You ain't never like I'll be here at 10:04. And they be rolling up at 10:04. Yeah, we need to learn some lessons from that.
Knows that they can say, "Hey, I would like to have my meeting at 9 p.m. With refreshments. I want special lighting." Come on, anything that you can imagine.
Yep.
That those parents know the system, they know their rights, and they will come in if they want to have their IEP meeting on a beach in Florida and they live in New Jersey. Make it happen.
They can happen.
But it goes back to parents wanting it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my kids' teachers know, and some of them are my colleagues. They know what I want for my kids.
Right.
So I want the conferences. Right. I want to know when there's a fundraiser. I want to know when there's a special lunching. I want it. And if I don't get it,
we're going to have problems.
I'm the worst squeaky wheel that you would ever have to deal with.
Why didn't you tell me? Right.
Yes. But parents have to want it. You know, educators have responsibilities, and we have extra things. It's a part of the job that we have to do. I also feel like we should be compensated, but that's for another podcast for another day.
Exactly.
But we know.
But I could get a taco. Now, don't play these games.
Exactly.
I can be convinced to stay for a taco. I'm just saying.
That community that had that tacos with teachers, she's not just feeding your mom and your daddy. That principal makes sure that she has enough resources to feed an entire family. Coming through the door, eat what you need. Parents, come and meet your teachers.
Because that's the other thing as a parent, and you have kids, I have kids. If you talk about 6 o'clock, because this is what I thought you were going to say, playing the devil's advocate, at 6 o'clock, it's time when you got little kids. Now, you got teenagers, you ain't got to worry about this now. But when they're little, you try to have dinner prepared for them at a certain time so that they can, eat and do some homework and go to bed, right? And so if you're calling these kind of meetings at that moment, you do have to be mindful that parents have to prepare meals for their kids. But I'm saying, particularly in Atlanta traffic is atrocious. And you can't get down the street nowadays from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock It's traffic somewhere. And so, how do we to maintain the core of taking care of the whole child, academically, socially, emotionally, with their parents, the family? How then do we create new places and spaces for parents to meet the teachers?
I think that some administrators are getting it. Like the administrator that had the fall festival the other day, he didn't want anybody to worry about that whole thing about dinner. Bring the kids, do whatever. We have the gym open. We have, all kind of things. He had the health department there.
But back in the day, the school, and this is a powerful piece too, the school, when the school was a community school, the school provided extra resources and things to help the community. And so I think another problem is we don't live in a community. Like, I don't live down the street. Now, when I worked in another side of town, I actually did live a mile away from school because that was a great thing, right? But that's not something that can happen all the time. Like, most teachers don't live in a neighborhood. So that's what makes it a challenge. So we do have to come up with new ways to get the same old results. How do we bridge that? And having a space where you say, okay, we're going to take care of everybody, and I'm going to bring the health people out, and I'm going to bring the people to brush your teeth, and you can check your eyes and all this stuff. Like, we have to make it a community thing, make the school a community stop for these things.
As I said, that's an administration and leadership. I will tell you, for the first time in a very long time, I live in the community that I work in. I used to strategically live somewhere else so I wouldn't have to have a parent conference in the middle of the aisle
at the grocery
Walmart.
store. Right, exactly.
But I live in the community that I live in, and I can tell you that this is like a hidden treasure.
It makes a world of difference.
That is very unique to this particular school system that I'm working in. They actually have health and clinical clinics. In some of the most impoverished schools. And I'm not talking about some little Rudy Poo operation.
Right. Just the nurse,
I have gone in, and there are some facilities in some of these schools that are nicer than some of the doctors that I've been to with insurance.
Right.
And I do think that it's underutilized. I work with a population, mostly immigrants, that do not receive any kind of state health or assistance or Medicaid. And they have these low-cost clinics that are underutilized. I mean, a lot of times you go in, they don't have anybody in there. But I have really worked this year to get the word out to the community that, hey, we have these resources here, let's use them, because the last straw has been these families going into debt because the child has gotten so ill that they've had to take them to the emergency room. I can say that the school district that I work in currently, they have a vision, and I think that we're almost there, but it has not been highlighted as one of the benefits. And I can say this because when I had a parent meeting for the students' families in this area, and I was talking to my coworkers, they had no idea that all of these schools in my cluster had health resources. Like, I mean, they were awestruck when I had the county nurse come out and talk to the parents, because I knew that flu season was coming, and also there's been new legislation in the state that I live in regarding immunizations for students that are coming from outside of the United States.
That's right.
And a lot of the students were having issues with having their immunizations transcribed into English, and they were being barred from registration. So I brought in the county nurses to talk to them about where they could go to get vaccinated and all of the requirements associated with it, and to also highlight, a lot of these children had never been to a dentist before.
Right.
But it all ties back into, and I know we can go so far off the subject, but it all ties into being a holistic teacher.
And actually, I was about to say, as you were talking, even though we started with alternative certification programs, the point of that conversation, and we are going to talk about this elephant in the room before we get off the phone, but the point of that conversation is to show there's a difference between teaching and approaching education from a business model and approaching education from a holistic model. A holistic model is what kids need. That's good practice for generations. Now, business models, I'm sure, have their place. But the fact that we have too many business models and not enough people that are looking at the depth of what we see on the front line. We see parents, we see, situations with health, we see situations with food, we see situations with homelessness. Like, there's so many things that these business models don't, and that goes back to teacher prep. So what are the teachers being prepared to do? And you can actually talk about that from your leadership perspective. If you're dealing with teachers that are coming from prep organizations or programs that are only looking at the hypothetical, or they're looking at the what's the word I'm looking for? The model where you just make the assumption that you're saving somebody, or, the deficit, that's the word I'm looking for. So you're approaching this whole thing from a deficit. That means you took, again, humanity out of this thing. And that is really still the topic of this podcast today is, let's talk, I'm going to call them out right now, TFA. Let's talk about TFA. Because if you have these teachers that are coming into the profession and they aren't being led or taught or trained or mentored by other teachers, not businesses, then they are not understanding, and this is why some of them quit. You don't understand the depth of what we do. You don't understand this job. So talk about that. I called them out, TFA, and I'm sure that I'm going to get some backlash. Good. Call me so we can have a conversation about TFA. That's Teach for America, for those of you that don't know what I'm saying. All right, go.
TFA. My issue with TFA is that, in my mind, I envision them sitting in a room watching Michelle Pfeiffer's, what was it, Dangerous Minds?
Right.
And I say
the
this
white
because
savior.
I have,
I'm sorry.
yes, I have come across a lot of TFA teachers that have this idealistic approach to life and don't. It's like they're trained in the best case scenario,
right,
and don't understand that they're being dropped off in the worst case scenario,
in the worst possible case scenario.
And it just, what bothers me about the whole TFA model is that for them, it's a means to an end. These people are coming in. They're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to hang out in the SWAT for, X number of years, pay off all my student loans. But this is clearly not the end of the road. So they are not truly breeding educators.
No.
They are, I guess, creating Band-Aids.
They babysitters
and over-glamorized babysitters. And babysitters that often don't have to deal with some of the issues that teachers like you and me, tenured teachers, people that have, even though we were alternatively certified, we have drank the Kool-Aid, and we know that we want to educate. Right. But I've been in situations where administrators have said, well, yeah, we know she can't control her class, but she's TFA.
Baby. And oh, Lord. So my question is, and I know the answer is pretty rhetorical, Why then are they in my building? Because, but that moves into a district mindset, that moves into privatization of education. Like, there's so many layers to that. But to merely say, I know they can't control their students. So, because what that does is, that means you coming across the hall to me. Can you hold this kid for this, that, and the third? Or can you, would you, woulda, coulda, shoulda? If we did not,
well, at least they're coming over to you to get help, because I've known there have been plenty in their room with the kids hanging from the ceiling
and throwing stuff,
or just sitting there, planning their summer vacation in Cape Cod, while sitting out this time where our kids are undereducated
and not being served at all. Major disservice. And to take it another level, this also breeds a problem with other teachers, because now you have, and I don't want us to, I don't want this to be a them against us. It's a model. The model, the business model is not for education. And when we have this business model, we create another problem. And that problem is, now I'm in competition with that teacher, because that teacher allows their children to do whatever. And then the kid comes into my class and they're like, well, why can't you just sit there and collect a check and just give us some busy work? Baby, I don't do bit. First of all, I'm not making a Xerox copy for you ever. That's what they got Google Classroom for. And the one copy that I make, I'm going to make 3 of them. I'm going to make a classroom set. Don't take my paper, because you're going to throw it in trash. It's going to be everywhere. The fact that this is how kids have been educated, the question, that would be like some good research to find out how many kids have been educated through TFA, and it might be out there. What is their ability as a student? Because now you really think all I'm gonna do is take a test, and kids have told me for years, we'll do nothing in here but read and write. I'm sorry, it's an English class, babe. You didn't know that was the requirement for an English class? Like, you didn't know this is how this thing go down? Well, why can't you just give us a packet? Oh, who gave you a packet? Well, you thought that was okay.
But it goes back to what I said before. A lot of these people that are coming in TFA, I don't know what the requirements are for content knowledge, how they are evaluating transcripts to decide, who's going to teach what.
A degree?
I guess it is, because
we
at
need
that
to check
point,
that out. Right.
Yep. Because now, part of the reason why you can't control your classroom is because your kids know that you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly.
And the root of what you're doing lies in the fact that you don't know your content. You don't even know why you're there.
Exactly.
I dealt with a teacher who was from somewhere up north that came to teach Texas history, and I am passionate about Texas history. I believe
you're from Texas, and that's your history.
Yes, like, but I believe it is the most interesting state history out of all 50 states. Right. Next to Hawaii and Louisiana, maybe California up in there too. Right. But she did not know the content. And she opened the book when we had books at that time, and she was reading page 1 right along with the kids.
Wow. Well, we're going to read this together, a code read. No, boo. You don't get to do a code read and you know nothing about this content at all.
Exactly.
You don't get to do no code read.
That's a lot of what I felt from my interactions with TFA teachers. But the fact that they too, those that came in and acknowledged that they were ineffective. Now, there were some hard workers. Yeah. But those that came in and knew that they were ineffective basically knew that they were untouchable. And they also knew that they had options. If it really wasn't working for them in the SWAT, they could quit, or they could go somewhere else.
And the problem with that is, again, the other teachers in the building, and then now we have to go through all these substitutes, and the kids are not being serviced. They're not being educated, and they don't like. Do you understand the long-term ripple effects of you. Now, there are, and I do want to put this out there, when we were making a generalization, there are some TFA teachers or some people that I'm sure started with TFA that knew that this was what they were going to do, and they're still in the cut, and they're still, and you know, we're applauding you. We're not talking about you, but we are talking about the model and how it is affecting, and it's an add-on problem to public education and public education reform and all these other things, because y'all are not helping kids read, which was not helping them to pass these tests, which is not helping them to graduate, which is not helping them to be productive for this so-called business world that you think that you're going to put them in.
If TFA really wanted to do something, they could flip their business model.
Yeah.
And when I say flip that model, they could recruit the best teachers in America.
You sure could.
Pay them what they're worth.
Sure could.
And take them to these impoverished areas.
Right.
And put them on the 3 to 4 year turnaround plan, and let those seasoned educators get in there and teach new teachers that are coming in how to maintain and grow even after they go.
And
if
you know what?
Maybe we need to do that.
Maybe we need to do that.
Flip that model.
Don't tell Teach for America. Look, don't tell TFA that. Maybe we need to make that model, right? Maybe we do. So let me say this one more thing. So this is the reason why I have to write down our notes, so that once we have these wonderful conversations, we're like, wait, there was one more thing that we want to talk about. So before we go, let's bring up the reciprocity certification. So that we talked about alternative ed programs and the evolution with the ones that you started, you were in, the one that I was in, and then where we see TFA and other models have been more, we've gone from a holistic model, which we were in, to a more business model. But then now when you talk about certification programs, and I think you mentioned something about online programs, and I went to University of Phoenix, and I know that some teachers get certifications from Phoenix. And it was interesting to me, if you go to University of Phoenix and you don't live there because you're online, you could get this certification, but then there was a reciprocity thing, because I feel like I know somebody that had done that. So what has been your experience? I left from Texas with a Texas certification, moved to Georgia, and it was a reciprocity. But when I moved and I wasn't trying to teach when I quit that first time, but when I left Georgia and went to Ohio did not receive my thing, and they thought after 15 years I was going to take a test and pay for anything. Baby, I'm not doing that. If I was like early in my career, you could have convinced me. But no, ma'am, I'm not doing that. So reciprocity and certification practices, what was your line of thinking when we talked about this as a topic as well?
Well, as I was working with a teacher this year who I was not his official mentor, but because he was struggling with lesson planning for the population that I service, I met with him the first week of school to discuss how we could move forward in making sure that the students were supported. And he shared with me some struggle that he was already having as a teacher.
Right.
He had moved from like Pennsylvania down to down south, and he did not know the community that he was coming into.
Right.
He was not clear. He clearly did not look like anyone from that community, and that immediately ostracized him.
Right.
But at the same time, he was from a community that did not look anything like the community to which he was getting ready to serve.
Right.
So here he is going through alternative certification online. He was hired by the district, and they told him he would not be able to receive a teacher's salary. He would have to be a long-term sub until he passed the first part of his certification.
Right. The content.
So here you are. Your program is online with virtually no hand-to-hand support.
Wow.
You do not know your content very well. You're trying to learn your content. You're in a new state, a totally new environment, and you don't have any personal support or professional support, as far as the certification. He had teachers in the building that were reaching out, and he had a mentor teacher there, but it was the first week of school. Everybody's trying to put fires out.
Exactly.
So in speaking with him, I asked, why did you decide to come down here to work on your certification? And what are your ultimate goals?
Right.
He said, well, I didn't want to stay where I was, so I decided to come down here and teach. But my goal is to go and teach in Central Texas. And I just started laughing.
So you went from Pennsylvania to the Bible Belt then to go out west. That's your trail.
So I started laughing. And he asked me, he said, why are you laughing? I said, because the state that you chose to get certified in, you can't take your certification anywhere.
Wow.
I said, you can go from the left side to the right side of the state, but you cannot take this outside of this border. I said, there are very few, if any, states that will offer you reciprocity. He said, what is reciprocity?
Oh, wow.
I said, oh, boo-boo.
Boo-boo.
Let's sit down and talk. Wow. And I explained to him, I said, hey, I got my initial certification in Texas, and I always make sure that I maintain it. I keep up with my PD hours. I make sure that I pay my money because I will never let that certification lapse.
Yeah,
I can always go back home, and I know that particular certification is portable.
Yeah.
And I shared with him when I was going through alternative certification that some people that were right there when I was in Texas, people from Louisiana coming over, they didn't receive reciprocity. And even though they were certified to teach in Louisiana, had to come to Texas and go through the program again.
Wow. Yeah, no.
And he had no clue about this. So then just sitting there, I was sitting in his classroom, and he was in tears. He was like, this has been a very rough week. I said, well, honey, the first thing, the problem is it's your room.
Right.
I said, you have this room set up and I made the parallel to Dangerous Minds. I said, it's like you wanted a big kumbaya fest, but you didn't know your kids.
Right.
You let everybody pick their own seat. I said, I never let anybody pick their own seat. And this is rooted in research.
Especially if you're new.
Exactly.
If you don't know what you're doing, like, boo. Because I use it as a threat. Now, don't make me have to move you, honey, because we still moving and picking classes for high school kids. Picking chairs. That's how you can offend little kids on that one. But when you don't know what you're doing, y'all in alphabetical order.
I'm going to tell you.
Here's your seating chart.
High school, I use the research. I tell anybody, every year of my teaching career, I have read the book, The First Days of School by Harry Wong.
Really?
And
let me write that down.
In that book, I have used the tools. My kids have never felt ostracized or picked on because they had assigned seats. I do an activity called Pick a Card. When you pick this card, I stand at the door when my new students are entering. I say, pick a card, any card. And when they pull that card and flip it over, it gives them their seating assignment and a list of things that they have to do. So that's classroom management. Nobody's running willy-nilly. Nobody's walking. I have my classroom rules up on my board, or whether it's electronic or written. But it creates the flow and the expectations for my classroom from the start.
From day one.
But where did I get the first day of school from? My alternative certification program.
Yeah, because I got it too. Look, I need to think about where is my book, because we all got that book, didn't we?
Yes, that very powerful HBU that produces productive people.
Yes,
And I still have that book. Every mentee that I work with, I give them a copy.
You're going to make me pull my copy out.
But I'm telling you that, sitting there with this young guy, who didn't know what reciprocity is, I'm like, before you do anything, you got to do some research. If you decide you're going to the Caribbean, don't you start looking stuff up?
Yep. Where you gonna stay, what you gonna eat.
Yes.
You know.
You have to know more about your field.
Yeah.
He did not realize that he was being recruited for one of the most culturally rich areas in the Southeast.
Mm-hmm.
He did not understand the population that he was serving.
Yeah.
And 6 weeks in, he's gone.
Wow. And that goes back to what we started with, these education programs. And so, you know, that we probably need to definitely have a whole nother podcast just to really examine, dissect the quality of education programs, which and a lot of the scholars that I've met, my mentor, Dr. Sonya Douglas Horsford, she's up at Teachers College in New York. But that's one of the things that she talks about, like, what are we teaching in these programs, whether they're alternative programs or whether we're just talking about Georgia State or, you know, just a state school or a private school. Like, what are we teaching? And that is definitely a topic that we can, that's a whole nother podcast. So we'll put a feather right there for that to be our next conversation, to really like look at that. So before we go, this was a fabulous conversation that we had today. And even though it may have appeared that we went off task, we really didn't, because we were talking about alternative education programs, you know, and the models, and, you know, the business model versus the holistic model of teaching, as well as understanding your job and what you're expected to do, and reciprocity. So all of those things I said, it was really good. Are there any final tips that you want to give for new teachers? Because I'm gonna promote this as a new teacher thing as well. Any tips for teachers, parents, leaders? Any tips? Any final words that you have?
The biggest tip I would like to give new teachers came about from a situation that I dealt with a new teacher when I was sitting in a professional development a couple of years ago down in Houston. As you are going into these communities and learning about the communities that you serve, do not try to make your experience their experience.
Right.
Do not try to always find a parallel or one up a student when they feel comfortable enough to share a situation with you.
Right.
In these turbulent times that we're dealing with racism and all of the challenges that students are facing, bullying and any number of things, it's important to listen and empathize, but you all, as the adult in the situation, you have to control the narrative and assert yourself as the adult that is charged with protection and safety of that child.
Number one.
So we know that everybody has gone through some things. Lord knows, Gina, you and I, we could write novels about everything that we've seen. But as an educator, it is important that you listen to and understand the experiences of your children and the challenges that they face. But don't demean their challenges by saying that you've dealt with that, so you deal with it. Right.
Because it's a form of erasure, and it's a form of disregarding their feelings. That is a powerful tip. So thank you, Elle Rochelle, for being on the show today. For my listeners, I'm so glad that you were here today. Hope you share this podcast with your community of teachers, scholars, activists, parents, and so on. Love to hear from you. Follow me. I'm sure I'm going to hear from you, some of y'all, about TFA, but I'm good. I'm game. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Twitter, even though I don't look at that one. Leave your comments and suggestions. Until we meet again, peace, power, and progress.